Hello, Atmore. It's the Lloyd and Friends Show. And now here's your host, Lloyd Alberton.
Hello, this is Lloyd Albritton on the Lloyd and Friends show once again, and I'm speaking to you here from WGYJ LP radio station. What we do is we broadcast the program on Saturday mornings. In fact, we're talking about increasing the program, by the way, maybe a couple of days a week. But we broadcast on Saturday mornings, and that's at 93.5 on your radio dial. And then what we do is we archive it, so that those of you who happen to miss the station, it's a Atmore, it's a small band station, a little nonprofit station here. And so for those that miss it, we'll archive it on YouTube. And so all you have to do is just go to YouTube and write in Lloyd and Friends, and you'll see all the interviews pop up so that you can pick it up. Now, not only that, but I want to let y'all know too that the program is what do you call that? Streamed on the internet. So you can go to the radio station website, and that's at let's see if I can remember it. That's at light935fm.com, light935fm.com, and that will take you to the radio station, and you can just click on it there, and it doesn't matter where you are. This is wonderful, isn't it, Floyd?
Yes, it is.
You can be in South Dakota, or you can be in Afghanistan, and you can pick the program
How
up.
about that? That's
And
great.
So if you have friends in these places, you can just tell them they can listen live through the internet, or they can go to YouTube and pick it up. So pretty soon, maybe we'll just have millions and millions of
Listeners.
Anyway, this is Lloyd, and I'm with my good friends Floyd Adams and his goodly and beautiful wife, Betty. Now, you might, some of you old timers might know Betty better as a Bartel. We've got a run on these Bartel sisters. Now, I've already had Betty's sisters, Bonnie and Amy. We did that one by telephone from Texas, and now we've got Betty. Now, Betty, you were the youngest of the three sisters, right?
Oldest.
Oldest. You know, I had an older brother, and Daddy went to Atmore one time while we were planting the garden. He said, "You boys keep working. Now Ronnie's going to be in charge." And when he got back, he forgot to take Ronnie off duty. And all through these years, Ronnie still thinks he's in charge. He still thinks he's the boss. So we just let him live that dream. How about you, Betty? Have you always been, or do they look to you for leadership still?
Not really. They look to me for laughs.
For life?
Yeah.
Well, she's kind of in charge of that house. I know that.
I'm in charge of Floyd. He's the only one I've ever been the boss of.
Well, he keeps you busy, I bet, doesn't he?
Yes.
No. Floyd seems like a really sweet guy. Although I've heard Floyd was is a renowned baseball coach. Now, you know, my first introduction to coaches was your friend Carl Madison.
Yeah.
And I was scared to death of Carl.
Everybody was.
He was a little guy in those days, but boy, was he mean. Yeah. I mean, I was scared to death. I remember one time I had study hall under Carl Madison, and I'm taking up all their time here, aren't I? I had study hall under Carl Madison. I was in the 7th grade, and it was a cold, cold day. And Carl come busting through the door, and he said, "Who opened that north gate?" And old Cecil Tuberville, he was a crazy guy sitting over in the corner. He said, "I did." And I looked over at Cecil, and I said, "Boy, how that guy is so brave. I mean, I can't even believe he just jumped right in there and confessed." I said, "It'd be a cold day before I confessed to Mr. Madison, Coach Madison, that I left that gate open." But in any event, you're not that way, are you? Your strategies are more soft-spoken, I would assume.
Well, I was so soft-spoken and mild-mannered that my players always took advantage of me, and I didn't get a chance to really express myself and my beliefs because they kind of ran things.
No, they did not. No,
they
did not.
I should not believe that, should I?
No.
I don't believe you can run a bunch of boys without being stern from time to time.
No, I learned a lot from Carl. He and I coached together almost 15 years during our careers, and he taught me a lot. I learned a lot from him, and working with him made me really a better coach because I got a better understanding of you've got to treat them differently in some respects, but the same in other respects. And you've got to know who you can get on to and who you can't get on to get anything out of. So He got on to them, all of them though. But Carl was an outstanding coach.
Do you believe? Did you enjoy boys in school? Do you like teenagers generally?
Yes. Otherwise, I coached 38 years, and otherwise I could have not stayed in it for 38 years. Lord, everywhere I went, I was surrounded by the finest young people in the world. Otherwise, I'd have given it up. But God blessed me in so many ways, and that was one of the blessings that I received from my career. Mm-hmm. And to be able to stay in a career for 38 years. When I retired after 38 years, I volunteered for the next 4 years for nothing because I missed it so much.
Work for nothing?
Work for nothing because I missed. Well, these were with former players that had head coaching jobs now and former assistants and friends that had head coaching jobs. So I missed it that much. I mean, I loved it. And then my knees got kind of bad on me, and I had to hang it up.
You know, that's kind of funny. Carl told my brother Ronnie and I. Ronnie's been friends with him. I've been friends with him through the years, and he applied for the job. I think Carl was. How old's Carl now? He's
91.
He's 91. This was 10 years ago, so he was 80 then at least. And he'd applied for that coaching job over at the high school, and he assured us that he was going to get it.
At Atmore?
Yeah, in Atmore. And he was really looking forward to it. I think he was disappointed when they didn't pick him. But I have no doubt that Carl could have went over there and got that team #1 in no time at all. He just seemed like he understood how boys' heads work. And I'm assuming you probably are the same way.
Well, I was with Carl at the country club that morning. We had 2 representatives from the Atmore program, and he was assured that he had the job. And then somebody got involved in it that I'm not going to call names or anything like that, and did not want Carl to have it. And ultimately, he did not get the job, which was a grave misfortune for the Escalona County High School.
I think so.
Yeah.
Well, we're talking about Carl a lot, but I love to talk about Carl. You know, he went on from my little school, Ernest Ward. I had him in the 7th grade, and the next year, he started moving up to the bigger schools, Milton, and that's where he went from there.
Well, I went to Milton with him that following year.
You did?
Yes. He invited me to go with him, and I couldn't pass it. That was my second year to coach. My first year was in North Alabama at a little town called Springville, Alabama, right about halfway between Birmingham and Gadsden. Okay. And it was a great little school. I loved it and good kids. But when I got the opportunity to get with Carl, I jumped on it.
Well, years later, he had gone to Tate and done big things at Tate and all that. And I think I don't know what happened, but they moved him to admin upstairs for a while. He hated that. And so they asked him if he'd consider coming back down to Walnut Hill. And I think he come back for a year, and then he was back on top.
Well, I went to Tate with him too, Lloyd. And he stayed 12 years. I stayed 11. He offered me the job the first year he went to Tate, and I accepted it. And then I declined, and I was coaching at Robertsdale at that time and decided I needed to stay at Robertsdale for another year. Then the next year, I called him back, and this is something, when you turn him down one time, this was something that he very seldom ever did, was give you a second opportunity to come work with him. And luckily, I got that second opportunity, and I stayed with him there for 11 years, and then both of us wound up leaving.
At Tate?
Yeah.
Well, he came back down to Walnut Hill there, I was telling you, for about 1 year, and he turned that whole team around. They couldn't win a game for nothing. I think he was like 8-2 the first season.
About Jackson Academy.
And then he moved on. But I had an opportunity for my son to know Carl Madison that I had talked about all these years, and he finally got a chance as a kid to know Mr. Madison as well.
Well, talking about Carl's abilities, he went to, after he retired from Milton, he went to Jackson Academy, a private school in Jackson, Alabama. Mm-hmm. They had not won a game the previous year. His first year there, he won the state championship. The second year there, he was undefeated and repeated as state champions. So, that's turning a program around in a hurry.
What did you learn from him? How does he do that?
Hard work, outwork them. Now, Carl was smart enough, he could outsmart them. But I didn't have that smarts. I had to outwork them, and that's the key to anything. And this is what we were trying to do with these young men, is get them ready for life and make them understand that they were going to have goals, and if they wanted to attain those goals, they had to work to attain them. That was the only way I knew to unless you married the boss's daughter or your daddy was the boss.
You had to work.
You had to work to attain your goals. Otherwise, they merely became wishes or dreams that you had.
What does the boy learn from sports?
He learns how to live his life. He learns after he gets knocked down in life, life is tough. And you're going to get knocked down many times, but you've got to pick yourself back up and get in the game once again. You can't stay down or you're going to be whipped. You're through. And I think you learn more toward life through athletics than you do in any classroom. Now, I'm sure I'll have some classroom teachers that will challenge me on that statement, but that's my feelings. Like I say, I was in it 38 years, and
it's the real deal, isn't
it? It is.
You actually get hit out there on the field.
Oh, yeah. You get knocked down many times in all your sports.
What about the idea that jocks aren't that smart?
When I was at Jeff Davis, and I'm doing a lot of reminiscing with Jeff Davis, we had a program up there called, it was academic scholarships, and they signed people based on their school academics and put them on scholarships at Jeff Davis, and they had a club. And I made an point that my baseball players, when they came in, I checked all of their grades at the end of the fall semester or fall quarter, and then I checked the academic grades, and for 6 years, our guys in baseball outranked them. Our grades were actually better than the academic all-stars or academic people. So I made sure that our president got a copy of that on her desk with a little note, look at what we're bringing into Jeff Davis, not only athletes but outstanding students.
Well, we had a boy that I went to high school with. He was a good athlete. You may know a boy named Lehman Gunn.
Yes, yeah.
Lehman was, he was smart enough. He's just lazy. But, his grades and all. Coach Joe Latham used to coach down there after Joe. And Joe told me one time, he said, they all gave me a hard time. They wouldn't let Lehman his grades, play ball and everything. And he wanted to quit school. He said if it hadn't been for football, Lehman Gunn would have quit school in ninth grade. He wouldn't even been at school. He stayed for the sports. Did you find that sometimes you have a boy that's the only reason he stayed?
I never asked a teacher to pass a student that had an F on his report card. My feeling was that if this boy is committed to playing the game of baseball or basketball or football, whatever it was, he would keep his grades up and pass. Now, there were some that had difficulty passing, and we may have to get extra work for them to get that F changed to a D or whatever. But mostly what we had, and Carl stressed those grades too. I mean, he checked them every 6 weeks, and if they didn't have what he wanted to have, they'd get a little lick or two here, a little motivation to bring those grades up.
Back in the days when they had that board,
that's
it motivated a lot of boys.
That was a good motivating.
They used to even drill holes in them where they hurt worse.
That's right. Make a little blister on you.
Make a little blister.
That's exactly.
But the worst boardings I ever got were some of the female teachers. Miss Nellie McKay. I don't know if you remember Nellie.
Her, yes.
Sweetest lady you ever saw. The hardest whipping I ever got was 7 licks from her.
Wow. Now I never gave that many. 2 was as many as I gave, and about as many as Carl would give. Because there was such a thing as making a mark on their behind, and of course it wasn't as bad back then. They didn't report teachers that much about paddling or
and whipping. We never thought of it as abusive back then.
No, it wasn't.
Wayne McKay used to always walk around with his board. It was like an extension of his hand. And later in his career, they made him put the board down.
Mr. R.E. Hodnett, our principal. Oh, goodness. He pulled off his belt.
Did he?
Yeah.
Mr. Hodnett and Mr. Barnes, who taught ag, and he coached here at one time. Herbert Barnes. He won 35 straight games.
The Barnes boys.
That was named after his. Those were his players, and they were winners. He also would put that board to you behind, and those men today would probably be in jail because they were overly discipline minded.
Jim Eddins from the winery.
I know Jim.
Jim told me a story when he said during World War II that a lot of these boys went off to war and they hadn't finished school, and when they came back, they didn't have night school and GED and stuff like. Oh, not it's GED. They come back to school to finish up their high school, and Mr. Hodnett, he said these were boys that had been all fighting the war, for crying out loud. They would misbehave in class, and he'd have to fight them down to the office and put that board on them, and he'd have to fight. He'd have to manhandle them. Because they were grown men in their minds.
Yes, they were.
They were.
Yeah.
They were.
They were. That was a lot of the football team that Mr. Barnes coached that had come back after World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And they left as boys and came back as men. And their opponents were playing against men.
I think the Barnes boys reunions are over.
Yeah, most of them. Carl may be the only original Barnes boy that's still
Who were
living.
some of them off the top of your head?
Judson Bronner, Walter Welch, Worm Welch. Golly, I'm getting old here. Earl Manning, that just recently passed away. Walt
Cook.
Wasn't Robert Faircloth in there?
Robert Faircloth was one.
And-
George
and,
Crook.
Bobby Davis was on there.
Bobby was a young one.
He was
a
young.
And they were Tom Bellyfort, Darby, Dix Darby. These guys were 250 plus. I'm having trouble remembering names, Lloyd.
I understand. In fact, it was kind of funny. I don't know if I ever mentioned it to you, but Joe Latham, he taught so many boys. He taught me and my brothers and all our generation, and then our children were back down there under him. And my son come home and he said, Daddy, I think Mr. Latham might be listening a little bit. He said, he keeps calling me by your name. And he calls Leroy Tellis, his boy Bodie, he calls him Leroy, and he calls all the boys by their daddy's name. And now that I'll be 75 this year. How old are you? You mind if I?
I'm 87.
87.
Yeah.
Well, I'm doing the same thing. I'm calling these boys by their daddy's name. And I don't think I'm senile. If I am, I've probably been that way for 40 years because I've been doing the same kind of thing. But now, Betty, I know you and Floyd got married later. You were
Middle-aged people.
Middle-aged folks.
Yeah.
Were you still working, Floyd?
Yeah, that was the year, and we got married in '84. That was the year I went to Jeff Davis as head baseball coach.
And I had never been around all of this stuff
Sports
before.
and stuff.
I would go with Julie Quimby when Robbie and Toby were playing Little League. We'd go over to the park over here, and that was all I knew about baseball. And I don't guess I'd ever been to a lot of football games because when we were in high school, that was the only sport there was. And so we. I went with him. I was madly in love with him, so I went to Bruton with him. We moved up there, and we lived in Bruton for 2 years till our parents got old enough that they needed us at home. His mother was a widow, and he was an only child, and my parents were getting older, so we decided we better move back to Atmore and let him commute instead of me. I was commuting to United Bank when we lived in Bruton.
You worked at United Bank?
I was the HR person at United Bank.
I want to tell you a cute little story about Betty. When I went to Jeff Davis, I did not have an assistant. I was having to plan all my practices. I was having to recruit, get out and find.
You were right by yourself?
Yeah, I was trying to get out and find baseball players, and I was gone a lot. And, she started accusing me of not loving her. Well, I said, Betty, this is just a very trying time for me right now. I have to find my ball players. They don't come to me like they did at Tate or any of these other high schools. I've got to go find them and talk them into coming here. And planning my practices, we were very organized. Everybody was doing something all the time. So it went on like that for almost a year. And finally, she began to tone down just a little bit. But I had finally convinced her that I loved her more than I did football and basketball. And then going in for baseball, when you go 2 for 3, that's a very good day. Do you understand what I'm saying?
When you go 2 for 3, that's a very good day.
So I didn't mention baseball. I loved her more than football and basketball. And when you go 2 for 3 in sports, that's a good day, especially baseball.
Leave it at that.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that expression. I used to be a stockbroker, and we didn't want clients to hear this, but they'd say on every trade, the stockbroker makes money, and the firm makes money, and by golly, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. The guy doesn't always make money.
That's right.
Is that typical for coaches to be obsessive? I mean,
Well-
I know coaches have to stay late and work the boys in the game. You put in a lot of time, but is that typical? Do you have to be?
Well,
kind of
it's
consistent?
according to the coach, Lloyd. If you want to win and be successful and move up to another job and improve your career steadily, you've got to be to a degree excessively, because you don't want to stay here all the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And that may be a good job. Some coaches do, but they have developed winning programs. And did you know Carl Madison at one time, we elected him in the first class of the Hall of Fame here.
Mm-hmm.
Carl was the 20th coach of all coaches in the United States with the number of high school wins. Now, that's pretty impressive. Of all the coaches in the United States, he ranked 20th.
In the whole United States.
The whole United States.
Well, I've always thought of him as a high school, but now, is there a difference in mentality between a high school coach and a college coach? I mean, I know college probably pays more money, but I always thought of Carl as like the Bear Bryant of high school.
Well,
he never
he-
wanted. He
knew-
never wanted to be.
Well,
a
he
college
was.
coach.
There's a lot more pressure on college coaches than there is high school. Now, some high schools, if
The
they have,
mentality of the boys, does it change? They've matured some by the time they get to college.
well, they're matured and they're more developed. They're
More
ready
physically
to play than these guys. These guys we had at high school, you had to start from the very beginning and try to
I see.
develop fundamentals and the correct fundamentals if they were going to win for you. Now, I know Carl had at one time, we were at Tate, and he told me that Vince Dooley was head coach at Georgia at that time, and he knew Vince personally, and Vince had called him and offered him a job on his staff at the University of Georgia. And I said, well, man, you're gone, aren't you? And he said, no. I said, what? You're not going to take the Georgia job and stay here at Tate? Yes, I am. I said, well, why? Well, if I want to go bird hunting on Saturdays or whenever, I go bird hunting. If I was up there on Saturdays at the University of Georgia, I may be in Arkansas or Colorado recruiting.
Right.
So I said, well, I guess I can understand that, but
Do you think Carl Madison would have been as renowned had he made the decision to go the college route
yeah, I believe in
as
Carl.
he was in high school?
I'm a believer in Carl Madison. He could have
He'd
done
do
it.
anything
He
he
could
wants
do what he wanted to do because he worked at it and he was that smart. Carl not only outworked him, he outsmarted him a lot of times.
You know, I'll say this one more thing about Carl, because when we start talking about Carl, his stories just keep
Yeah.
coming to mind. But he's famous from his early days for that center sneak and that
Yeah.
right tackle pass.
Yeah.
I thought that was funny because he had he knew that was illegal, but he would just pull a little stuff like just to see if they could catch him.
Right. Well, the only way they caught him was watching film after the ball game the
After
next
the ball.
day.
It was pretty smooth.
Yeah. He moved a running back into center, and the running back would put the ball up behind him in his behind, and the quarterback would come out like he had the ball and start handing it off, and the flow would go this way, and all the defense would go that way. Then the running back, as playing center at that time, would delay just a minute, and he would take off down the opposite sidelines, and there was no catching him. It was a good play.
That's funny. Now, you work for Carl. Now, did you ever coach football too? You
Yeah,
coached
I was
football and
the offensive line coach at Tate and head baseball coach.
head baseball coach.
Uh-huh.
Now, what drew you to baseball? Were you a good baseball player when you were young?
That was my first love, was baseball. I played more baseball and loved it more. I played in high school. I played with a town team here. I played at Auburn on the freshman team. I played every inning of every game. Then I made the varsity team my sophomore year as one of 6 outfielders that was kept. And then the strangest thing happened. The coach forgot my name. My name was not on any lineup card, or I was not used as a pinch hitter, or base runner, or defensive player. So I decided to leave, and I went to Howard College, which is now Sanford University, and played 3 more years there. And then I had an opportunity to play a little bit in the San Francisco Giant baseball organization and stayed there a couple of weeks and got hurt and came on back home. But I love baseball.
Were you a good baseball player? When you
Fairly well, fairly good.
Did you play football?
Very little.
Very little.
Very
football,
little. I got out of football in the 9th grade in spring training. I was playing defensive back and quarterback, and they started a sweep. Charles Madison started a sweep around my end, and I was coming up thinking to myself, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? He's going to run About that time, the defensive tackle tackled him back there behind the line of scrimmage, and I went up, "Oh, great job, Harold, great job." I had him, boy. I was on the way. I had him. And then our quarterback, we got down on the goal line and right on about a 1 foot line, and we're going to quarterback sneak it in. And this guy, Harold Shirley, looked at me, a big guy. He was tall. He said, if you fumble this ball, I'm going to whoop your you-know-what. I said, man, you just get me the ball. I felt the ball hit my hands and bounce. And luckily, I fell on it. So that saved me right there. And then after that, I decided that I'd do my hitting with Louisville Sluggers.
Hitting with what?
With Louisville Sluggers.
Oh, okay.
Play more baseball.
That makes sense. Yeah. Well, what about the glory? You know, I mean, I know baseball is an all-American sport, but in high school, baseball doesn't get as much glory and attention as football, or as much money.
No, it gets very little. You have a very small budget. You're not recognized with pep rallies or anything like this. Probably your main attendants are parents and girlfriends that come out to see their boyfriend. But it's a great sport. I love it.
You never begrudged that part of it.
Oh, no. I understood that part of it.
No.
That was the way we were brought up in Atmore.
Mm-hmm.
Football was king here.
Mm-hmm.
Basketball, I played basketball. Very few people came. I played baseball. Very few people came. But it didn't matter. That's what you want to do. That's what you were happy doing.
Mm-hmm. Now, we've been spending a lot of time talking to Floyd, and that's easy to do because, Floyd, you've done so many interesting things. But I don't want to ignore Betty. She's liable to get up and leave us. But Betty, you have proved one thing. You said Floyd was one that talked all the time and wouldn't let you talk, and you've kind of proved that, haven't you?
Yeah.
Right here.
Yeah. That's what I wanted.
Now, I've talked to Amy about before she came to Atmore in Pensacola in the war years. After the war, your family kind of moved up this. How old were you then? You were a little. How much older than Amy?
2 years.
2 years.
Uh-huh.
So
we remember the. Excuse me. We remember the end of World War II. Pensacola being a Navy town.
Uh-huh.
Oh my goodness! We went downtown. I was on my daddy's shoulders, and
when the
I
war
guess
ended?
Mama. Yes, and I guess Mama was carrying Amy, but the sailors and their families, that everybody they were up in store windows. I still remember all that. Everybody just went crazy. It was so wonderful to have it over with.
I've seen the film clips of it. You know, it's just hard to believe.
Yeah, it's hard to believe we've lived that long.
So you came up to Atmore. You were about what age?
10.
10.
About 10.
Can you remember back? Is it something you wanted to do, or were you kind of scared?
Oh no, I didn't like it at all. Oh my God!
didn't?
I think it looked to me like at my age there was one paved street, and the people talked different from us, and they made fun of us for talking different. I don't know what.
You were more eloquent.
I don't really know. I just didn't understand anything about it and why Daddy wanted to do this to us. I thought it was punishment. But Daddy had managed a hay packing company in Pensacola, and he wanted to go in business for himself. And so he built the plant up here that's now the American Legion building over on
VFW.
VFW, okay.
Yeah, I'm in the VFW, and Billy Gates would kill me if I didn't correct you on that.
Okay, okay.
VFW, yeah.
I haven't. I think when they first went in there, we were invited to something, and we went over there to see what they had done to all the lockers and everything.
Uh-huh.
And I finally got to where I liked it, but it was so different. It was just so different.
Well, people still talk about Bartel's. What do you call it? Butchery, or what would you call it?
They had people would bring in their cattle and pigs, or Daddy would go over and bid on them at the auction across the street.
Uh-huh.
Over there was the auction pen, and on Tuesdays, Daddy would go over there and buy cattle, and they did everything. They did the butchering, they did skinned them, whatever, and cut them into steaks and put them in people's lockers if that's what they wanted, or he did it for the individual people.
Did he bring them in there do you have a lot back there? Did he do the butchering?
He had a pen back there.
Did he have some help? I mean, you need
Oh
some
yeah,
muscle to do that sort of
he
thing.
had he had help.
Okay.
In fact, so that we would appreciate what we had, Daddy made Amy and me go and watch. I think she told about that. Go and watch the slaughter one day, and I thought it was horrible. That's just the way he was. He was a tough nut, and he wanted us to be tough too.
Did you get along with your father?
Yes.
Was he? What kind of person was he? Was he a kind man? Or?
Strict.
Yeah. Real strict.
He was strict.
Especially with these girls. You know, I had two girls, and the youngest was a boy. And I gotta say, the girls were more difficult for me, because Floyd, I knew what was on those little boys' mind when they took one of my girls off, and I worried sick about them.
Daddy did too.
Boy,
he did too, and I was the first one, so I had to pave the way for the others. And Bonnie was 10 years behind me, so they had mellowed out a lot by the time she came along. She was a little spoiled, I think, but anyway,
Bonnie?
Yeah. But I was 10 years older than her, so I didn't pay that much attention to her. But anyway, Daddy, these boys back then, the style was Levi's and a white T-shirt.
White T-shirt, yeah.
With sleeve, they didn't roll up their sleeves and put cigarettes in them like you see on TV, but they wore just like the white T-shirts, and Daddy considered that underwear. And he told a couple of them, said, you better
go put a shirt on.
Go home and put a shirt on over your underclothes. Don't come back here looking like he didn't mind. And we had one telephone in the house, and if the boyfriend called and you talked longer than, if he needed the phone or if you talked longer than like 5 minutes, he just walked by and punch it off. That was it.
Did it make you mad?
Oh yeah. Go in my room. Go in my room and pitch a fit.
You didn't sass him directly though.
He'd know. Oh no. No.
Did you get a whipping? I mean, like with a belt?
No belts. Never belts, and never slap in the face. I've had friends that told me that one of their parents would slap them in the face, and I thought that's just child abuse. That's horrible. And no belts, hairbrush or hand mainly.
Any pinching in church? That's probably your mother. Tell me about your mother. I've heard stories about your father, but I've never heard too much about your mother. Tell me what she was like.
She was a good mother, but she played a whole lot of bridge, and she played bridge all the time with her friends, and Amy took up bridge when she was in college, but I never did. I thought if like Mama still had to. She was still reading up. I mean, this contract bridge just goes on and on and on forever. And I played a little bit.
Is that a game? I don't even know anything about bridge. Is that a game that just continues?
It's a card game.
Is it a continuous game or each? I mean,
they play so many rounds of rubbers is what they call it, and they change tables and play again. They have the little square card tables for four. And I tried it, and I just sweat. And one day I went to a party, and I had on a wool dress, and it was red. It was white with red flowers on it, and it just got ruined. And I thought, this is ridiculous. I'm not doing this anymore.
Lord, ask her about the time the FBI came to arrest her.
Oh no, Floyd.
The FBI came in to arrest you? What did you do?
They came to the school. Well, I told you I was a tomboy. I just was always into something.
The FBI?
It was here in Atmore. Okay. There was an old boy named, he's not here anymore. He's moved away. James Kennedy was his name. And if he was around, he'd probably be a young Barnes boy. But anyway, he teased my friends and I all the time, and he lived around the corner from us. And so we got home, and there was a note from Mama. She was off somewhere playing bridge, and she had left us a snack. My girlfriend was with me. And so we were looking for something to do, and we got bored. I just couldn't stand to be bored. And so we decided we would scare his mama to death and get him in trouble. And so we wrote a note in red crayon and put it in their door. If you don't leave $1,000 in the old oak tree, we're gonna kidnap your baby. Talking about old James, we thought that was our only child at that time. Yeah, and we stuck it in the door, and we jumped off the porch into the bushes. Well, somebody saw us jump off the porch.
Oh, boy.
This lady called the police, and the police called the FBI, and they said it was written in red blood. Got in at that time. That was the first time they had 2 newspapers, but it got in both newspapers. And we had just moved from Pensacola, and Mama said, "Here we are, new people in town," and the FBI did come to the elementary school that was directly across from where we live now. We live in the brick house right across from Heritage Park. And they called the principal. What was his name? Garland Butler. Mr. Butler called Joyce and me out of our class. And I remember he had a stack of quarters in his hand. He was going plinkety, plinkety, plink. And he wanted to know what that was all about, that he had talked to the FBI, and they were out of it. They knew it was children. But he threatened us really good, and we never did anything like that again. But my mama was so embarrassed, I thought I would never get to go anywhere again.
Was your mother angry with you as well?
Oh, yeah, both of them. Well, no, Daddy kind of laughed about it, but he wouldn't dare in front of Mama because she would not have appreciated him giving me any leeway for doing something so horrible.
Sometimes when you're kids, you do that stuff that's it's all a big hoot to you, but it can be pretty serious. I've pulled a few of those myself.
Yeah. Well, what really caused the problem, it wasn't James's family that still lived there. It was some people with a baby, with a real baby, and they called the police.
Oh.
I left out the punch part of it. as usual.
You got to practice up on that one.
Yeah, right. So I don't think James ever even knew about it.
Who were some of your pals in school?
Ann and Bill Staff were both in my class.
Bill Staff? And Ann was just...
So many of my classmates are gone. Betty Jo Johnson, who's gone. Betty Claire Bruton. Everybody was named Betty back then. Faye Pipkin. All of those are dead.
Did you have a high school boyfriend? You Bartel girls were pretty popular, I gather. Y'all were like cheerleader stuff like that.
I married my high school sweetheart, but that didn't work out, and I found me another one.
Sometimes it doesn't work out.
You found me, didn't you?
That's right.
Tell me how that happened. Tell me about that.
I was divorced 17 years, thinking I probably don't want to ever get married again after the first one.
Yeah.
And I tell this is not true, but I tell it. I was riding around one night.
Once you start a story, you got to stick with it.
I know what's coming.
Looking for a stray that may be walking streets in that or something. And I needed a little gas, so I pulled in the old service station on East Nashville Avenue, and he was filling it up while I went to the bathroom.
It was a pretty bad looking place, too.
I noticed on the wall was clean, except there was one sentence up there for a good time called Betty at 368-4142. So I said, well, I don't know who that is, but I haven't ever tried. I don't have anything to lose.
You wanted to have a good time, didn't you?
Yeah, so I called her and we went out. Now, that wasn't really true, but...
I always tell that I had sneaked in the men's room and wrote that so I'd have a good time.
You were looking for something.
Yeah.
But,
a wild guy.
Yeah, a wild one.
After that first...
Because that was a terrible place.
After that first date, I decided, I probably would get married again.
What did you like about her? What struck you?
Well, she was. She had a very good sense of humor. She had that pretty smile. She was a looker. I mean, a looker back in her day. And I just had said, I had told a friend of mine that I would like to date. She was divorced, and Betty Bartel. And he said, well, she's going with an attorney in Bruton.
Which was not true. I never dated any attorney from
I can't
Bruton
compete
or anywhere.
with an attorney. I'm a school teacher, and he makes big bucks.
Floyd.
So I waited about a year before I called.
Scared you off a little bit, huh?
Yeah, that knocked me off a little bit.
He was afraid I'd rebuff him, and he didn't take that well.
I didn't like denials.
He didn't like to lose.
Well,
he's not a loser.
Gwen and I, my wife Gwen,
right.
we went to high school together, and I went through a couple of marriages. She went through a few. And we met 45 years later.
At a class reunion or what?
No. We met on Match.com.
How
I had been living single. I'd been married. I had my first wife 28 years, my high school sweetheart, and we had our children. And then I won't go into those details, but
Right.
I had a second wife that was mismatched, and that didn't last. That lasted about 4.5 years. So I've been single for several years, and I ended up working for Hunt Oil up in Ouray, Colorado, Montrose, Colorado. And that's a little cow town, kind of like Atmore, only it's a western, cow town. And I used to I had a buddy up there, another gray-headed guy like me, and we'd get together occasionally. And somebody asked him, "How do you like it here?" And he said, "I could really love this town if I could just learn to love ugly fat women."
Love it.
Of course,
That's good.
they had some hardy ones up there. They could pull a wagon, some of them, And so I had gone on Match.com, and I had put up there interested in meeting somebody 50 miles from Montrose, Colorado. Well, I didn't meet anybody, and it expired. And so when I came back here, left that job, and I came back home, my father was getting kind of old, and I came back and kind of passing through. I really planned on going back to work somewhere, which I've always had to leave Atmore to get the kind of jobs that I wanted. So when I got back, I got this email from this lady. She had a picture on there, but I didn't recognize her. And she said, "Who are you?" And I sent her back a little paragraph. Well, I've been gone for years, but I went to high school down here, and I'm Lloyd Albritton. And she immediately knew who I was then, but she didn't tell me who she was. Because, with these websites, they use these handles. You don't say, "My name is Gwen."
Oh, yeah.
So her handle was like Cameron. That's her grandson. It had just recently been born. So she called herself Cameron 123 or something like that. And so she sent me a little blip back and said, "Well, call me at my office." And I called, and the lady answered the phone, and I said, "Do you have a Cameron who works there?" And she said, "No, there's no Cameron here, but Cameron's grandmother works here." And I said, "Who is Cameron's grandmother?" And she told me who she was. Then I took another look at that picture. She said, "Oh, Gwen, yeah." So later, she said something. We fell in love pretty quick and got married. I said, "Listen, I'm just passing through here," and she kept pestering me. And I said, "Well, what is it do you want? You want to get married?" And she says, "Well, yeah." Kind of had that in mind. I said, "When?" She says, "When do you think?" I said, "How about Saturday?" So that was like Wednesday. So we got married, and we've been married almost 14 years now. Yeah. And it's worked out real well. But a couple of times Gwen has said to me, "Well, why didn't we meet in high school? Why didn't we date? Why didn't we get together?" And
It wasn't meant to be yet.
That. I said, "Well, now that you mention it, I will tell you this story. When we had our 11th and 12th grade junior and senior play, you and I were together down by the foot of the stage there in the old building, and I asked you out one time, and you just flipped your nose and just walked away." And I said, "That is the most stuck-up girl I ever saw." And she said, "Well, when I was in high school, one boy said, 'Lloyd, you didn't try to act like Pat Boone. You thought you was Pat Boone.'" So I had the white shoes, and I played football, and so, and of course, when you're in school, boys ask girls kind of jokingly because in case they get turned down, they can say, "I was just joking anyway." Yeah. That's mostly because you're scared of them, Well, I did something like that, and that's why she said she turned her nose up at me, because I wasn't being serious. I said, "No, I was serious. I saw you. I remember you, And then one day here at the house, I said something to her, and she flipped her nose and walked away from me. And I said, "That's it. That's it. There. Uh-huh. That's the very behavior reason we didn't get married."
Well, when Floyd called me to go out, after James Norris told him I was seeing somebody else, he waited an hour. Well, James is gone, and his daughters think it's funny. Okay, so yeah, I told them, and they just died laughing. But anyway, after that, he called me to go out, and I remembered him as the tall boy 4 classes ahead of us. And that was in the hall.
That's a long way in high school.
My daddy wouldn't have let me go out with somebody 4 years older. 2 years older was really too much to suit him. But anyway, all I knew was he wasn't an axe murderer, and I wasn't seeing anybody at the time. So we went out, and we dated for 3 years, kind of waiting for my 2 girls and his 2 boys to grow up and get finished growing up. And then one of my girls had married and moved to Texas, Fort Hood. Ugh. and had a new baby. And the husband called me and said, I need help. So he took me to the airport in Mobile, and I went to Fort Hood. I went to Killeen. They lived in an apartment, and helped with the baby. And during that time, there weren't cell phones to stay connected or anything, and they didn't even have a phone. And I thought, I'm missing that old boy. And we had been going together 3 years, and I thought, if I'm ever going to get married, this is probably the one. But I wasn't going to tell him that. When I came back, he came to the plane and got me, and he said he had the same feeling, so we went ahead and planned a wedding in July of 1984. And I had never had any regrets. He has, but I haven't.
No, not after I convinced you that I loved you better than basketball and football.
I know.
You were convinced.
I've had to learn a whole lot about sports. He's also a rabid Alabama fan too, so I am too now.
But I went to Auburn. I played baseball at Auburn 2 years, and I'm a biggest Alabama fan. My oldest son got a baseball scholarship, a good baseball scholarship to Auburn later. But I just like Saban. I like the way he coaches.
Uh-huh. Now, Floyd, you have children. How many children do you have?
I have 2 sons.
You have 2 sons. And Betty, do you have children?
2 daughters.
You have 2 daughters.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And they're within a year's age. The oldest one's hers is a year older than my son, and the youngest one, hers is a year older than my youngest boy.
Gwen and our children are similar.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Similar. Our children. In fact, our children run around town together. They knew one another.
Mm-hmm.
Oh
before
my
we
goodness.
Did, from their high school.
We're leaving tomorrow to go and see his oldest son's grandson play baseball in Marianna, Florida.
Marianna.
Mm-hmm. We're hoping they're going to get to play.
Yeah, we don't know about this weather.
We'll see one Thursday anyway. Sean is my oldest one. He's the one that got scholarship to Auburn. Then the young boy played at the University of Montevallo, and then got his master's at Jacksonville State University, coaching baseball, a grad assistant. And then he coached for a number of years at the University of West Alabama. And now he was the AD at a private school in Meridian, but he's still working there, but he's no longer AD. But his son just graduated this year.
What is AD?
Shane,
Athletic
director.
Athletic director.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now his boy played football, but he didn't like baseball at all. It was too slow for him.
Uh-huh.
And he'll graduate this year.
I played football just so I could get a girl. I was scrawny. You know, we didn't lift weights back in those days.
I know.
We were all just scrawny country boys, and a lot of us could run fast. That's the biggest thing we had. Every now and then we'd get a big boy. Guy Dennis, I don't know if you
remember
know
yeah,
Guy Dennis.
I do
He was
too.
a big boy.
Mm-hmm.
Through elementary school, Guy was considered a fat boy. You know, he was just a big fat boy, but then he muscled out, and he was so much bigger than the rest of us. He was on first string, I think, in the 9th grade. He was on the first string. Of course, we weren't a big school, but that's a pretty good ball teams.
Yeah.
But and then Guy, of course, went on to play ball.
Yeah, I always had a lot of respect and liked Joe
Latham?
Latham. Yeah, Joe was
You know, I see Mrs. Latham around occasionally. She's still, I see her in Walmart, usually with her daughter,
Yeah.
Carolyn, or one of the other daughters, and I think she's probably in her 90s.
She's like
She
that
is.
90. She was in my Sunday school class here in First Baptist, and she's had to drop out. She just can't go and get out like she could.
Mm-hmm.
But she is a fine Christian lady, a fine lady.
I'm trying to get some of the older folks. You remember Lucy Cunningham?
Yes.
Oh,
You know
yeah.
Lucy?
Yeah.
Lucy's agreed to be on the program.
Good,
But she lives
good.
in Daphne. And,
She's
and we had a
very
little bit of
alert,
problem
very-
scheduling, but she's going to be on the program.
Good.
Her husband was called Tennessee. His name was Kenneth.
And he
He
played football here.
here. He was one of the Barnes boys.
Oh, really? Okay.
And,
He was an insurance
he
agent,
went
wasn't he,
into
Floyd?
when he older, he became an insurance agent here in Atmore.
Uh-huh.
And then when he died, I think she moved to
Lake
Daphne.
Forest over in
Yeah,
Baldwin
over
County.
there.
I wanted to get Miss Jean Webb on the program. I've been
Yeah.
close friends with her and stayed in touch with her. Now, in high school, I wasn't exactly one of her favorite students.
Well,
'cause
you
she
know
was a
she has
serious
passed
teacher.
away recently.
She passed away recently,
Okay.
yeah. And I talked to her just within a month before she passed away. I called her to, well, this was when we had a little class reunion. And she called me back and said she couldn't make it, which I knew she wouldn't be able to, but I wanted to invite her. And we talked for a little while, and she said, when we left, she said, now, she always called me Mr. Albritton. Yeah, she called her students,
Yeah.
Mr. said, "Now, Mr. Albritton, since you are a student of mine, I feel like I need to give you an assignment. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to don't forget to say your prayers, and always remember to brush your teeth. Because when you get my age, you're going to need it. And you're going to need them. That'll be a line that sticks in my head forever, what she said. Don't forget to say
I
your
enjoyed
prayers
reading
and brush
about
your
her.
teeth. She was a character. I took a class under her after I got out of the service. I've been 8.5 years in the Marine Corps. When I got out, I went to school at Faulkner, and I had her in a class. And I got to know her as an adult at that time. And through the years, I've written a couple of books. She read them. She's written a number of books. She read my books. Didn't just write me back to say I liked them or didn't like them. She made comments and graded them. And I was appreciative of that.
I love it.
And here, the best compliment she ever paid me when I ran for sheriff here a few years ago. I don't know if you knew I ran for sheriff. And lost, of course. But she told me, I saw her at her funeral after that, she said, "Don't worry about that, you're too good for that job." I never thought she thought that highly of me.
That's great.
But
That's great.
That's always wonderful to get a compliment from a teacher.
Yeah.
Old teacher, that's right.
Yeah.
I think mine all dead. Most of my friends, Lloyd, have died now that I was in school with. My best friends in high school.
John Graham, he still Mrs. John.
Let's don't call names. Let's just say.
Well,
but there's a
I
lot
didn't
of
say anything bad about John. He
Carl
just
is
got-
still living, and he's probably my best friend.
We
right
went.
now.
And, Carl is living in an assisted living now. His wife died the day after they named the baseball field, football field at Tate, the
Grace
Carl
was a
Madison
very
Field.
nice person.
Yeah,
And
she
Grace
She taught my
passed
kids
away.
sister.
She had pulmonary fibrosis and died in the hospital the next day. But anyway, we just wanted to get him out of Pensacola, so we had a sleepover, and we were going to keep him for 2 nights. And Floyd went and got him, and he brought his clothes. And after one night, he told Floyd he wasn't staying the next day. He was ready to
Well,
go.
he just said he had some things he needed,
to
to
do.
back at the place. But Carl is, it's the Shelton Manor.
Shelton Manor. It's a brand new place.
New place right before you cross the bridge going over 9 Mile Road in Ensley, what's called Ensley.
Right.
And if you ever go by there and want to stop by and see him, I'm sure he'd love to see you.
We took
Okay.
him. We took him to
We-
Smokies recently.
We go and take him to dinner from time to time,
Okay.
and he and I talk on the phones pretty regular.
He likes to go to McGuire's. We've got to go back and take him to McGuire's.
I may just do that. I had Carl on the old show too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I interviewed him,
okay.
but I'd love to get an update if I could just move my microphones down there. Maybe I could get
Well,
him.
he's kind of like all of us. He's beginning to get a little forgetful, and
Yeah.
that would be probably a problem. But
Yeah.
great guy, greater coach. I mean, he
Good
was
friend.
good best friend. We used to go to Vegas with him every summer. They had timeshares. They had 11 timeshares throughout the country, and these places were fabulous. They were very upbeat, very nice. And I would drive out, and he would provide the housing in 2 and 3 bedroom houses, apartments, and we would stay a week and play a little bit and sightsee. And but I never let him.
I started to say
Once we got out of school, once we quit coaching together, and I had to ride with him on trips then, I never let him drive anymore.
Oh, really? He was a bad driver?
Well, he wasn't a bad one, but he was the only
He
one I
drove
knew that
fast.
could drive and sightsee. Look over here. And I was holding the wheel right here, trying to keep it in the highway, and he was looking over here in the mountains and there. So
that happened down south of Las Vegas one time. We were going down to what was that
Death
little
Valley.
town?
I can't remember.
Down on the Colorado River. Anyway, there was a casino town down there, and Floyd let him drive that day, and we had rented this
Cherokee.
Jeep Cherokee, and Floyd and Carl were in the front seat, and we were Grace and I were in the back, and I could see Floyd. There was a grip right up over Floyd's. In front of Floyd, and his knuckles were
white.
white as snow. We were in the back seat, hunkered down.
I looked over and he was hitting 90. I said, Carl, no, we got plenty of time. We don't have to go this fast. It didn't
Well,
slow him
didn't
down.
he had a motor coach, didn't he? Or
Yeah,
did-
yeah,
At one
yeah,
time.
At one time, they would travel in it and
Something would always happen. One time he left the steps down and they got knocked off.
Another time, he left a pistol in it, and Grace left $800 in it, and they lost the pistol and the $800.
Oh,
But he finally got rid of that.
That was when it was in a shop somewhere.
Yeah, that was
on
in a
a
shop.
trip.
It was being serviced.
And they didn't lock it. Well, they couldn't lock it because it had to be worked on. So somebody in the shop stole
you know,
it.
years ago when our kids were coming up, they were in their early teens. My brother Ronnie and I, we decided to rent a motorhome
Uh-huh.
and go on a vacation together up in the mountains. And we stayed gone 2 weeks. And we love one another. I love all my brothers, and
Yeah.
I love seeing them. But you know, a little bit of an older brother goes a long way.
Right.
And spending 2 weeks together in that motor coach, two families, it was a hoot. We had a hoot, but we got up in those mountains with that motor coach, and I don't think either one of us would ever drive a motor coach again in the mountains.
He never wanted
That's
it. He
something
ne-
I never
That was
wanted.
just too much. It was a lot of problems.
He had to
That was
substitute bus
This
drive.
was something I never wanted because I had to drive the Jeff Davis baseball bus on some trips. And I promised God then if he'd get me out from behind that wheel, I would never get behind a wheel like that again. And I haven't. But,
Yeah. We
I
thought we
enjoy-
lost our brakes one time, and it was
Oh,
going,
huh.
and Ronnie was just turning white. He was driving,
Oh,
and I said,
my
Ronnie, what's the
word.
matter? He finally got it stopped. He said, God, I thought I was losing it. He said, there was no brake left, and this thing was going downhill. But he just had to calm down. I mean, I didn't even see that he was upset. I thought he had control of it, you know, but he didn't.
Well, I enjoy my sisters too. We have had some lovely trips because of my brother-in-law being stationed all over the world. Thomas Latino, and we visited he and Bonnie in Germany, and they took us all over the place to Switzerland and France and Liechtenstein, different places, and then later we visited him in Oahu when he was stationed at Hickam Field, that was shot up during the
Boy, they
attack
have
on
traveled a
Pearl
lot.
Harbor.
Yeah.
They left the holes in the walls of the fence. I guess it was
well, it's where the office is there on Hickam Field.
Where he
the
was
bullets
stationed.
are still in the building there
big holes
as a
in the white
reminder.
paint.
as a reminder. And then while we were there, we visited
Maui.
and also
Kauai.
Kauai. And then came back to Oahu,
Oahu.
and came
I was
home.
stationed there in the Marine Corps for
Okay.
Really, at Hickam?
at Pearl Harbor.
Pearl
I was
Harbor.
stationed
Okay.
at Marine Barracks Pearl Harbor.
Okay.
We
Beautiful
did
place.
that. We
had
did
lots
that.
of-
Beautiful place, but you know I didn't like it. I didn't like all the spit and polish being in the
Oh, yeah,
military.
right,
It's,
right.
you know, I was only a sergeant, and everybody else is a general. You know, so I didn't like that too good. Well, guys, we're out of time. David tells me to cut them off at 58 minutes so he can log in an hour with our ins and outs and all of that. But it's been just wonderful having you guys.
Well, we have enjoyed it, Lloyd, and I hate to see you cut us off because she's just getting wound up.
I
She's just starting-
I understand. I think we could go another hour easy.
Easily, she could.
Well, you know, it's always that way. Everybody says, in fact, Floyd, you said as you walked in the door, I'm not very interesting. And almost everybody tells me that same thing, but we always run out of time.
Yeah.
So I think the folks around Atmore are going to enjoy hearing you guys just be yourselves and chat a little bit. And I appreciate your willingness to do that. I didn't have any barriers or no political defense. I told my brother Greg, if you'll come over and do one, I won't ask you a single thing. There's enough about you I can reveal without politics.
Well, we have enjoyed it, Lloyd. We surely have.
Yes.
Well, you guys
We
are
have.
going on a trip. Have a safe trip
Thank
for a
you.
couple of days. And God bless you. And you're both still looking good.
Well,
Thank
thank you.
This is Lloyd Albritton, Lloyd and Friends, with my friends Floyd and Betty Adams. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Lloyd and Friends Show with Lloyd Alberton.